I'll start on chapter 3, The Invitation. By the time Harry had arrived in the kitchen, the three Dursleys were already seated around the table. None of them looked up as he entered or sat down. Uncle Vernon's large red face was hidden behind this morning's Daily Mail, and Aunt Petunia was cutting a grapefruit into quarters, her lips pursed over her horse-like teeth. Dudley looked sulky and furious, and somehow seemed to be taking up even more space than usual. This was saying something, as he always took up the entire side of the square table by himself. When Aunt Petunia put a quarter of unsweetened grapefruit into Dudley's plate with a tremendous, "There you are, Diddy darling," Dudley glowered at her. His life had taken a most unpleasant turn since he had come home from summer with his end-of-year report. Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia had managed to find excuses for his bad marks as usual. Aunt Petunia always insisted that Dudley was a very gifted boy whose teachers just didn't understand him, while Uncle Vernon maintained that he didn't want some swotty little Nancy boy for his son anyway. He also skated over the accusations of bullying in the report. "He's a boisterous little boy, but he wouldn't hurt a fly," said Aunt Petunia tearfully. However, at the bottom of the report there were a few well-chosen comments from the school nurse that not even Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia could explain away, no matter how much Aunt Petunia wailed that Dudley was big-boned and that his poundage was really just puppy fat, and he was a growing boy who needed plenty of food. The fact remained that the school outfitters didn't stock liquor bottles big enough for him anymore. The school nurse had seen what Aunt Petunia's eyes, so sharp when it came to spotting fingerprints on her gleaming walls, and in observing the comings and goings of neighbours, had simply refused to see that, far from needing extra nourishment, Dudley had reached roughly the size and weight of a young killer whale. So, after many tantrums, after arguments that shook Harry's bedroom floor, and many tears from Aunt Petunia, the new regime had begun. The diet sheet that had been sent by the smelting school nurse had been taped to the fridge, which had been emptied of all Dudley's favourite things, fizzy drinks and cakes, chocolate bars and burgers, and filled instead with fruit and veg and all sorts of things that Uncle Vernon called rabbit food. To make Dudley feel better about it all, Aunt Petunia had insisted the whole family go on a diet too. She now passed a grapefruit quarter to Harry. He noticed that it was a lot smaller than Dudley's. Aunt Petunia seemed to feel that the best way to keep up Dudley's morale was to make sure that he did, at least, get more than Harry. But Aunt Petunia didn't know what was hidden under the loose floorboard upstairs. She had no idea Harry was not following the diet at all. The moment he had got wind of the fact that he was expected to survive the summer on carrot sticks, Harry sent Hedwig to his friends with pleas for help, and they had risen to the occasion magnificently. Hedwig had returned from Hermione's house with a large box stuffed full of sugar-free snacks. Hermione's parents were dentists. Hagrid, the Hogwarts gamekeeper, had obliged with a sack full of his own homemade rock cakes. Harry hadn't touched these. He had had too much experience of Hagrid's cooking. Mrs. Weasley, however, had sent the family Errol with an enormous fruitcake, assorted pasties. Poor Errol, who was elderly and feeble, had needed 5 full days to recover from the journey. And then, on Harry's birthday, which the Dursleys had completely ignored, he had received 4 superb birthday cakes. One from Ron, Hermione, Hagrid, and Sirius. Harry still had 2 of them left, and so, looking forward to a real breakfast when he got back upstairs, he started eating his grapefruit without complaint. Uncle Vernon laid aside his paper with a deep sniff of disapproval and looked down at his own grapefruit quarter. "What is this?" he said grumpily to Aunt Petunia. Aunt Petunia gave him a severe look and then nodded pointedly at Dudley. He had already finished his own grapefruit quarter and was eyeing Harry's with a very sour look in his little piggy eyes. Uncle Vernon gave a great sigh which ruffled his large bushy moustache and picked up his spoon. The doorbell rang. Uncle Vernon heaved himself out of his chair and set off down the hall. Quick as a flash, while his mother was occupied with the kettle, Dudley stole the rest of Uncle Vernon's grapefruit. Harry heard talking at the door, and someone laughing, and Uncle Vernon answering curtly. Then the door closed, and the sound of ripping paper came from the hall. Aunt Petunia set the teapot down on the table and looked curiously to see where Uncle Vernon had got to. She didn't have to wait long to find out. After about a minute, he was back, and he looked livid. "You," he barked at Harry, "in the living room, now." Bewildered, wondering what on earth he was supposed to have done this time, Harry got up and followed Uncle Vernon out of the kitchen and into the next room. Uncle Vernon closed the door sharply behind both of them. "So," he said, marching over to the fireplace and turning to face Harry, as though he was about to pronounce him under arrest. "So," Harry would have dearly loved to have said, "So what?" But he didn't feel that Uncle Vernon's temper should be tested this early in the morning, especially when he was already under severe strain from lack of food. He therefore settled for a politely puzzled look. "This just arrived," said Uncle Vernon. He brandished a piece of purple writing paper at Harry. "A letter about you." Harry's confusion increased. Who would be writing to Uncle Vernon about him? Who did he know who sent letters by the postman? Uncle Vernon glared at Harry and then looked down at the letter and began to read aloud. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Dursley, we have never been introduced, but I am sure you have heard a great deal about Harry, from Harry about my son Ron. As Harry might have told you, the final of the Quidditch World Cup takes place on Monday night, and my husband, Arthur, has just managed to get prime tickets through his connections at the Department of Magical Games and Sports. I do hope you will allow us to take Harry to the match, as this is really once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Britain hasn't hosted the World Cup in 30 years, and tickets are extremely hard to come by. We would, of course, be glad to have Harry to stay for the remainder of the summer holidays, and to see him safely to the train and back to school. It would be best for Harry to send us your answer as quickly as possible in the normal way, because the Muggle postman has never delivered to our house, and I'm not sure he even knows where it is. Hoping to see Harry soon. Yours sincerely, Molly Weasley. P.S. I do hope we put enough stamps on." Uncle Vernon finished reading and put his hand back into his breast pocket and drew out something else. "Look at this," he growled. He held up the envelope in which Mrs. Weasley's letter had come, and Harry had to fight down a laugh. Every bit of it was covered in stamps, except for a square inch on the front, onto which Mrs. Weasley had addressed the Dursleys' address in minuscule writing. "She did put enough stamps on then," said Harry, trying to sound as though Mrs. Weasley's was a mistake anyone could have made. His uncle's eyes flashed. "The postman noticed," he said through gritted teeth. "Very interested to know where this letter came from, he was. That's why he rang the doorbell. Seemed to think it was funny." Harry didn't say anything. Other people might not understand why Uncle Vernon was making a fuss about so many stamps, but Harry had lived with the Dursleys too long not to know how very touchy they were about anything even slightly out of the ordinary. Their worst fear was that anyone would find out that they were connected, however distantly, with people like Mrs. Weasley. Uncle Vernon was still glaring at Harry, who tried to keep his expression neutral. If he didn't do or say anything stupid, he might just be in for the treat of a lifetime. He waited for Uncle Vernon to say something, but he merely continued to glare. Harry decided to break the silence. "So, can I go then?" he asked. A slight spasm crossed Uncle Vernon's large, purple face. His moustache bristled. Harry thought he knew what was going on behind that moustache. A furious battle as two of Uncle Vernon's most fundamental instincts came into conflict. Allowing Harry would go would make Harry happy, something Uncle Vernon had struggled against for 13 years. On the other hand, allowing Harry to disappear to the Weasleys for the rest of the summer would rid him 2 weeks earlier than anyone could have hoped for. And as Uncle Vernon hated having... Hold on, I turned the page too soon. And Uncle Vernon hated having Harry in the house. To give himself thinking time, it seemed, he looked down at Mrs. Weasley's letter again. "Who is this woman?" he said, staring at the signature with distaste. "You've seen her," said Harry. "She's my friend Ron's mother. She was meeting him off the school train at the end of term." He had almost said Hogwarts Express, and that was a sure way to get his uncle's temper up. Nobody ever mentioned the name of Harry's school aloud in the Dursleys' household. Uncle Vernon screwed up his enormous face, as though trying to remember something unpleasant. "Dumpy sort of woman," he growled finally. "Load of children with red hair." Harry frowned. He thought it was a bit rich of Uncle Vernon calling someone dumpy when his own son, Dudley, had finally achieved what he'd been threatening to do since the age of 3 and become wider than he was tall. Uncle Vernon was pursuing the letter again. "Quidditch," he muttered under his breath. "Quidditch. What is this rubbish?" Harry felt a stab of annoyance. "It's a sport," he said shortly, "played on a broom." All right," said Uncle Vernon loudly. Harry saw with some satisfaction that his uncle looked vaguely panicky. Apparently his nerves wouldn't stand the sound of the word broomsticks in his living room. He took refuge in pursuing the letter again. Harry saw his lips form the words, "Send us your answer the normal way." He scowled. "What does she mean, the normal way?" he spat. "Normal for us," said Harry, and before his uncle could stop him he added, "You know, oil post. That's what's normal for wizards." Uncle Vernon looked as outraged as if Harry had uttered a disgusting swear word. Shaking with anger, he shot a nervy look through the window, as though expecting to see some of the neighbours with their ears pressed against the glass. "How many times do I have to tell you not to mention that unnaturalness under my roof?" he hissed, his face now a rich plum colour. "You stand there in the clothes Petunia and I put on your ungrateful back." "Only after Dudley had finished with them," said Harry coldly, and indeed, he was dressed in a sweatshirt so large for him that he had to roll up the sleeves 5 times to be able to use his hands, and which fell past his knees of his extremely baggy jeans. "I will not be spoken to like that," said Uncle Vernon, trembling with rage. But Harry wasn't going to stand for this. Gone were the days when he was forced to take every single one of the Dursley stupid rules. He wasn't following Dudley's diet, and he certainly wasn't going to let Uncle Vernon stop him going from the Quidditch World Cup. Not if he could help it. Harry took a deep, steadying breath and then said, "Okay, I can't see the World Cup. Can I go now then? Only I have to finish my letter to Sirius. You know, my godfather." He had done it. He had said the magic words. Now he watched the purple recede blotchily from Uncle Vernon's face, making him look like a badly mixed blackcurrant ice cream. You're writing to him, are you?" said Uncle Vernon, in a would-be calm voice, but Harry had seen the pupils of his tiny eyes contract with a sudden fear. "Well, yeah," said Harry casually. "It's been a while since he heard from me, and, you know, if he doesn't, he might start thinking something's wrong." He stopped there to enjoy the effect of these words. He could see the cogs working under Uncle Vernon's thick, dark, neatly parted hair. If he tried to stop Harry writing to Sirius, Sirius would think Harry was being mistreated. If he told Harry he could go to the Quidditch World Cup, Harry would write and tell Sirius, who would know he was being mistreated. Or if he couldn't go to the Quidditch World Cup, Harry would write and tell Sirius, who would know he was being mistreated. There was only one thing for Uncle Vernon to do. Harry could see the conclusion forming in his mind, as though the great moustached face was transparent. Harry tried not to smile, to keep his own face as blank as possible, and then, well, all right, then. You can go to this ruddy, this World Cup thing. You write and tell these Weasleys. They're to pick you up, mind. I haven't got time to go dropping you off all over the country, and you can spend the rest of the summer there. They can tell your godfather. Tell him you're going. Okay, then, said Harry brightly. He turned and walked towards the living room door, fighting the urge to jump and whoop. He was going to the Weasleys. He was going to watch the Quidditch World Cup. Outside, in the hallway, he ran into Dudley, who had been lurking outside the door, clearly hoping to overhear Harry being told off. He was looking shocked to see the broad grin on Harry's face. That was an excellent breakfast, wasn't it? Said Harry. I feel really full, don't you? Laughing at the astonished look on Dudley's face, Harry took the stairs 3 at a time and hurled himself back into his bedroom. The first thing he saw was that Hedwig was back. She was sitting on her cage, staring at Harry with her enormous amber eyes, and clicking her beak in the way that meant that she was annoyed about something. Exactly what was annoying her became apparent almost at once. Ouch, said Harry. What appeared to be a small, grey, feathery tennis ball had just collided with the side of Harry's head. Harry massaged his head furiously, looking up to see what had hit him, and saw a minute owl, small enough to fit in the palm of his hand, whizzing excitedly around the room like a loose firework. Harry then realised that the owl had dropped a letter at his feet. Harry bent down, recognised Ron's handwriting, and tore open the envelope. Inside was a hastily scribbled note. Harry, Dad got the tickets. Ireland versus Bulgaria, Monday night. Mum's writing to the Muggles to ask you to stay. They might already have the letter. I don't know how fast Muggle post is. Thought I'd send this with Pig anyway. Harry stared at the word Pig, then looked up at the tiny owl, now zooming around the lampshade on the ceiling. He had never seen anything that looked less like a pig. Maybe he couldn't read Ron's handwriting. He went back to the letter. We're coming for you, whether the Muggles like it or not. You can't miss the World Cup. Only, Mum and Dad reckon it's better to pretend, to ask their permission first. If they say yes, send Pig back with your answer pronto, and we'll come and get you at 5 o'clock on Sunday. If they say no, send Pig back pronto, and we'll come and get you on 5 o'clock on Sunday anyway. Hermione's arriving this afternoon. Percy started work at the Department of International Magical Cooperation. Don't mention anything about abroad while you're here unless you want the pants bored off you. See you soon, Ron. Calm down, Harry said as the small owl flew low over his head, twittering madly, with what Harry could only assume was pride at having delivered the letter to the right person. Come here, I need you to take my answer back. The owl fluttered down on top of Hedwig's cage. Hedwig looked coldly up at it, as though daring it to come closer. Harry seized his eagle feather quill once more and grabbed a fresh piece of parchment and wrote, Ron, it's all okay. The Muggles say I can come. See you at 5 o'clock tomorrow. Can't wait. Harry. He folded up his note, very small, and, with immense difficulty, tied it to the tiny owl's leg as it hopped on the spot with excitement. The moment the note was secure, the owl was off again. It zoomed out of the window and out of sight. Harry turned to Hedwig. Feeling up for a long journey? He asked her. Hedwig hooted in a dignified sort of way. Can you take this to Sirius for me? He said, picking up his letter. Hang on, I just want to finish it. He unfolded the parchment again and hastily added a postscript. If you want to contact me, I'll be at my friend Ron Weasley's for the rest of the summer. His dad's got us tickets for the Quidditch World Cup. The letter finished, he tied it to Hedwig's leg. She kept unusually still, as though determined to show him how a real post owl should behave. I'll be at Ron's when you get back, all right, Harry told her. She nipped his finger affectionately. With a soft, swishing noise, she spread her enormous wings and soared out of the window. Harry watched her out of sight, then crawled under his bed, wrenched up the loose floorboard, and pulled out a large chunk of birthday cake. He sat there on the floor eating it, savouring the happiness that was flooding through him. He had cake, and Dudley had nothing but grapefruit. It was a bright summer's day, and he would be leaving Privet Drive tomorrow. His car felt perfectly normal again, and he'd be going to watch the Quidditch World Cup. It was hard, just now, to feel worrying about anything, even Lord Voldemort. And that's the end of chapter 3. Oh, it's good. Any of you who've only watched the movie and haven't read the book, you're in for an absolute treat. I don't, anyone, I mean, I know there's probably going to be some people out there who've only watched the movies, and you like it enough, and maybe you haven't heard the books read before, and I don't know, maybe you've heard that, obviously the movies don't have as much content as the books. But the fourth book, I find, way more than any of the others, have the strangest content cut, particularly the World Cup, as you'll find out as we go along, as they're some of the most interesting and, in terms of the Harry Potter world lore, all those different witches and wizards together, and, them passing all the I won't say, well, because you'll find out whenever we read it, but you'll see soon enough how much you're missing by movies. And that's the same for all books. If you only watch the movies of the books that are out there, you're going to miss so much. And anyone who, like me, loves to read, yourself, you go to a movie adaptation of a book, and you're like, that was barely recognizable. What did I watch recently? Do you know The Maze Runner? The sequel to that, The Scorch Trials. What was that sequel? It was completely almost unrecognizable. I mean, everything from their escape, and they didn't go down the tunnel with the metal blob things. That's maybe fair that they didn't want the horror of the head sucking things. But that would have been such a great scene. Can you imagine it being dimly lit, and your man running behind someone who screams and falls, and he's like, and you can film it like, just not quite pitch black, but you can see his hands, and it fades to the darkness around him, and he's padding slowly up, the legs, then the torso, and then where's the head? How much of a cinematic would that have been? But no, they had to have whatever they did as the alternative to that, and just even having other adults there just ruined the whole vibe. Whenever they were obviously completely alone, whenever they first go to the whatever centre that was, well, I say completely alone, you know what I mean. But then the crossing, the deserty bit of it, and the fight at the end with all the things. It was just, it wasn't good. And whoever had taken it was like, okay, my artistic license. Oh well. But literally, I'm trying to think of a good adaptation I've seen. We won't mention Aragon. Did I ever tell you I had a friend in high school, and you could just set her off for hours by mentioning Aragon, the Aragon movie. Because, how did they have so many famous people in that cast and ruin it so spectacularly? Just shows you, isn't it? My probably unpopular opinion is that if you're an actor and you've done a defining role, if you think of, well, Daniel Radcliffe in his Harry Potter movies, or Elijah Wood, if you're watching any other movie, you're like, oh, Harry Potter's in this. Or, oh, look, there's Frodo, or, any movie you can think of, anything with household names like Tom Cruise or, whoever. If you're not doing a movie in that series, you're like, oh, look, it's Tom Cruise again. And it really takes you out of it. Whereas if you're seeing a movie with all new actors and our actresses, or I suppose they are all actors these days, aren't they? In whatever scene you're watching, it it doesn't take you out of it at all because you're looking at strangers, not familiar people. You're not watching the Black Widow and being like, ha, look at him holding that light like a wand, or whatever the case is. But yeah, that's my opinion. You should be one movie, and that's it. So you heard me, actors. No more roles for you. Nick Cage, I'm looking at you. Sam Jackson, you too. You're in too many movies. Stop it. All right. But we'll leave it there. Thanks for listening. We'll do chapter 4. No, Thursday. Wednesday or Thursday. I'll see. And thanks for listening.